Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well, and yes, tons of Brazilian organizations out there in esports could very well be in trouble, especially around games like Counter-Strike or other FPS games. And if anyone out there has a great memory, we talked about this same story a few months back this summer, and I swear, have you guys ever looked at yourself a few months later and thought, wow, I used to look a lot better than I do now, and wonder where you went wrong? That's it's a weird comparison side by side. When we talked about this in the summer though, it was not too big of an issue, right? It was being talked about, potential legislation being formed around what is actually deemed as esports and what's deemed as, well, not esports or traditional sports over in Brazil, and they were trying to delist CSGO amongst other games as well as traditional esports, as they also treat like sports, which offers a lot more benefits to players out there as they travel when it comes to visa, so on and so forth. And now it's unfortunately enough moved to a new stage out there, that being Bill 383. Yes, Brazilian government now being involved, guys, legislation as well around this Bill 383, trying to push it through, and it could mean some huge changes for people and pro players out there who are attached to games like Counter-Strike and other FPS games as well. As one of the first notions they do try and state when they're trying to push this is, now when it comes to actually define esports, esports will not be tied to games which are violent, which is obviously a huge issue. MiBR, Furia, I guess we could have others like Queso. There's a lot of Brazilian leagues out there, a lot of Brazilian teams out there involved in Counter-Strike and other FPS titles, but they go on to state other things as well, which means these games cannot actually be tied and classified as esports if they're not only violent, but if they also involve things like sexual nature, hatred, prejudice, discrimination, or drug use inside their titles. So you think of to pretty much any FPS out there involving a weapon is probably going to be seen as violent. Rainbow Six is another gigantic esport in Brazil, and so yes, this could be very troubling. That's why teams like Furia, teams like MiBR are already tweeting out about this and saying everyone vote no, because they're pretty much trying to delist CSGO and other titles from being esports altogether, which could greatly influence this scene, which is already very sensitive around the entire world with these kind of issues. And thanks to Draft 5, also Raul on Twitter on top of that, they have now clarified. I will link their article down below, which does transcribe. You guys can also translate it into English as well. It kind of tries to break down what exactly is going on besides trying to delist some games out there from being esports. And the great unknown is especially how this could impact tournament organizers, player visas, alongside that any events to be held inside Brazil. Can they actually hold events for these esports if they're attached to violent games? That's the great unknown if this were to somehow go through, and that's why it can be very scary if you're a Brazilian organization heavily reliant on FPS titles, which we saw, LG formerly was. Now they're out of CSGO and they're going into Call of Duty, which again, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, CSGO, how do they all tie to this bill? That's the great unknown, which is very, very scary. Again, their article will be linked down below. We just don't know enough about what this would influence, but you got to probably agree and assume the worst if this does come to fruition. And surprise, surprise, who's actually backing this bill? According to Draft 5, according to Raul, other sources as well, yeah, the people trying to push this bill, they're not tied to esports, they're not tied to gaming. I know you guys are so shocked by that. Even further, according to Draft 5 as well, during their first actual meeting about this, yes, there was legislation and higher ups in the Brazilian government trying to push the fact that GTA is a violent game. As I'm sure you guys are well aware, GTA is not an esport, so that is how, dare I say, dumbfounded some of these higher-ups being involved in trying to push this bill are. They think Grand Theft Auto is a video game that's an esport. Yeah, what else to say? This is just a tough situation to be in, and you got to imagine if organizations are actually tweeting about this and telling us to vote no to this bill, then it's definitely reached a point in time where, yes, it could be very dangerous if it were to somehow go through. On the other points, though, besides violence, I don't know how these titles are affected by sexual nature, by hatred, by prejudice, by drug use. We talked about this during the summer. Maybe the stim shots in Call of Duty, and maybe that's a representation of some sort of drug use, I guess. Besides that, I have no idea games out there. There were many jokes around this when it first broke as well, around CSGO and drug use, how there's literally no drugs in the game. But I guess if you're a senator and you think it is, you can probably derive some weird way of these guys being on drugs inside the actual game of CSGO. I have yet to see a great example of that besides the stim shots in Call of Duty. And so how this is going to apply, how this will affect things, I will keep you all posted. It does seem MiBR, Furia, other organizations are worried enough to tweet out about this, and there could be some gigantic changes coming to the Brazilian esports scene. I will keep you all posted. Until next time, hope you guys all enjoy your weekends. Be safe, all right? Smile today. I'll see y'all back here sometime soon.